Welcome to the Kung Fu Podcast Flow Drill. Exploring the culture, the adventure, and the impact of martial arts. That's what Kung Fu Podcast is all about, and I'm your host, T.W. Smith. Welcome to the program, and we're running around episode number 137. I'd like to welcome you if it's your first time here to the program. This program is designed for you, a martial artist of any status, of any rank, and I want to let you know that you're in the audience of some of the finest and sharpest martial artists in the world. Needless to say, these are the types of people who take a great deal of care in honing their craft. These Kung Fu Podcast Flow Drills, as one listener several months ago referred to it as a mini-cast, is a way for me to help stay on track. Sometimes it is honestly just a way for me to take a breath and maintain some sense of continuity without trying to just rush through week after week in trying to put together a quality program, in the sense of it takes a lot of research and work. It's also a great way to let you know where I'm at and what I'm currently working on for us. As we move into the flow of this episode, I saw where Spanish researchers had just completed a study of 3,000 people, and they were doing it looking at Tai Chi in regards to helping fall prevention. Now, I still work in the clinics, and I still work at a lot of the facilities where some of the folks who are really concerned, who are over the age of 55 to 60, about the risks of falling. And falling is one of the greatest risks for people over the age of 60. It is estimated around the world that 1 out of every 3 people over the age of 65 will fall at least once in the coming year, and 50% of those folks will have multiple falls. And as many of the people who are in that age group will tell you, it scares them to death. You can literally watch them change how they live, how they move, all because of the real fear and risk of falling. And the real danger of falling is a hip fracture. 1 out of 10 people in this age group will die within 4 weeks of having a hip fracture. Well, these university researchers in Spain found that in this 3,000 people, they reduced risk of falling by nearly 43%. I also know that other systems, such as Qigong, Bagua, various styles of karate, have also shown to improve functional health, reduce falling, and improving several other risk factors in association with being healthy and taking care of yourself. In fact, I'm going to have a few of those research studies available to you in audio format coming up in probably the next couple of months. I would encourage you that if you're a martial arts instructor, to research your style and system to see if it has any third-party, legitimate research done on it. Now let's move over to an email that I got from Jonathan, where he wrote, "Hello, Sifu. I'm a big fan of your podcast, and I've listened to all of them, and I enjoyed them a lot. I've been thinking about opening up my own school, and I'm trying to understand what goes into that. Would you be willing to share with me any tips or advice on opening up a school?" Well, Jonathan, thank you very much for writing in, and also thank you very much for being such a loyal listener. And yes, I am willing to share with you 10 things I jotted down, and these are just off the top of my head, and I can assure you there would probably be about 10 more if I took about another 20 or 30 minutes to jot them down. But off the top of my head, here are 10 things that I really encourage you to do or not do in opening up your school. And the first one is to avoid taking out loans. I'm not saying don't do it, but if you can avoid running up credit cards or taking out loans in order to start up a school, by all means, do that. I started this school out small here in Raleigh, North Carolina, and a bootstrap model, and it started small, and I've built it out over the past 14, 15 years or so. I've never gone out to take a loan, but I have busted my ass working multiple jobs in order, in some cases early on, to keep it going, and mostly because when I first opened the school, it was for me to practice with a couple of people who were interested in learning. I needed a place to practice, and it's expanded since then. Number 2, be prepared to market yourself more than advertise yourself. And if you're not quite sure what the difference between marketing and advertising is, I would definitely start there. Putting an ad in a newspaper, that's advertisement. Getting yourself out in public, doing your kata or form out at a local park, and doing so consistently is a way of marketing yourself. Put on your t-shirt, go out there and just do your work. Another way to market yourself is to support others by giving to the community. For many years, each fall, NC State would bring me and some of my students over to work with their teachers who are graduating in the upcoming year. It was a fantastic opportunity for me to support the young folks as they were getting ready to embark on their careers in a very stressful job. And if you've never been a public school teacher, let me tell you, it can be a real bear at times. You've got to love that kind of work. And in fact, that kind of marries over here. You better love teaching martial arts or love the martial arts, because teaching it will stress you from time to time. But a great way of getting yourself started is to get out there and give yourself to part of the community. For example, volunteering for maybe a public school when they're having a special event going on and they would like to have a martial arts instructor come out there and teach kids fundamentals of your martial art. And trust me, moms like people who help take care of their kids. And speaking of moms, you might also offer to support single moms in your area who need to learn to protect themselves. Unfortunately, there are many single moms who are the target of abusive exes or abusive boyfriends. Number 3 on my list is be prepared to work long hours till you get some air underneath your wings. It takes quite a bit of effort and persistence to get yourself to a place where things will start to flow for you. So eat right, take care of yourself, and be prepared to put in the extra time. Number 4, have confidence in requiring a fee for your martial arts services. Earlier I mentioned about marketing yourself, and I think of marketing as investing yourself in others, and that seed will grow as you go along. But when it comes to actually providing services, be prepared to ask for a fee that is fair in your community for what you're going to do. If you're thinking about opening up a martial arts school, you want to make sure that you are mentally and emotionally ready to do it. I would highly encourage you to go over to Ian Abernathy's website, and I'll have a link in the show notes and on the website. And the podcast that I would highly recommend in this particular case is titled Money and Martial Arts. Irregardless of the style that you practice, that's a good martial arts podcast for you to listen to. Number 5 I have on the list is do your SWOT analysis or any other viability research, including location, usual travel times in your area, and reasonable location. Don't just look for low rent, because low rent in a very remote place on the outskirts of the boonies is not going to have nearly the success rate that you're going to be looking for. You're better off investing a little bit more low to moderate rent near a larger community. Number 6, learn the social media format that carries your voice and the people that you want to appeal to. Each one of them, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Tumblr, and many others, you have to kind of know what you're going to be teaching, who is that going to be made for, and where do they stay. Do not try to get yourself on all the social media formats. It will be a waste of your time, and you're not going to have time to waste. Remember what I said in number 3. Be prepared to work very long hours. So you don't want to be working in places that you're not going to see much of a return. Number 7, be emotionally ready to eliminate the 20%. And I can tell you that 80% of your problems are going to come from a small group. Usually they're late on their fees, or they didn't pay you, or they're always complaining about this or that. Questionable conduct in classes, trying to lead when they're supposed to follow. You might go through any number of things, but most of the issues that you're going to face is going to come from a very small area, and you're going to have to be able to manage that both intelligently and emotionally. Number 8 is I would encourage you to go at it on your own. Learn to find yourself, find your stability, find your versatility, find out what you're not good at, and then build a team as you go and as you need it. You don't want to build a team too fast and not have anything to do, but you don't want to be losing folks because you're unprepared to build one when you need it. Number 9 is something that you will hear many of the good martial artists and martial arts researchers reference. is learn to get clear on your lexicon. If I'm talking with Ian Abernathy, for example, he's real clear these days about exactly what he means, and if he finds out later he needs to change a word here or there in order to best suit what we're trying to communicate in the martial arts, he does it. Dr. Ben Judkins, who we just finished doing a 5-episode podcast using several of his essays in regards to the biography of Sun Lutang, I can tell you, every time I write to Ben or he and I communicate, I don't care what it is about. Whatever it is about, the first thing he's going to ask you is to define it. If you say, hey, Ben, I'd like to talk to you about martial arts, he will say something back in his next email, which is usually about a paragraph long, which is something like, are we referring to martial arts post-World War II, martial arts pre-World War II? Is this weaponized martial arts, hand-to-hand strictly, sporting martial arts? You know, he wants to get real clear about what it is that we're communicating about. However, let me share this as a balance to it, okay? The defense of that is that you will be clear in your lexicon and what you're trying to say and what you're trying to communicate. But on the prosecution side of that, you also have to understand what it is that the people that you're trying to serve, how did they say it? You have to know their language and then learn to translate. A good example is that when we were being taught martial arts, we seldom to never use the word self-defense. Because the word defense actually implies that you're waiting for something to come to you, and that's not how we were trained. We never said defend yourself. And then number 10 is embrace the understanding that no matter what you do, you're not going to be perfect. You're going to make big mistakes sometimes, little mistakes other times, and you're going to make adjustments. Try to learn as quickly as you can so you do not make critical mistakes and the same mistakes over and over again. You learned that in your martial arts, right? If you're not applying this armbar right, you don't just keep doing it wrong over and over again. You try to figure out what did you do wrong, and you make that adjustment. So do the same thing in your work. Work on your business and in your business. Use one of the rules that I practiced from the Marine Corps. One of my good friends, a former active Marine who worked with me, also taught me while we worked together opening up fitness and wellness centers in North Carolina, and then I began participating in opening up outpatient clinics in central North Carolina and Houston, Texas. And the Marine rule is simply this. I call it the 3/4 rule. If you are 75% sure that you can make it, if you're 75% sure that you have what you need, if you're 75% sure that you're going to have the fortitude and the will to get through opening up a school, if you're 75% sure that you know what you don't have and that what you're going to need to find along the way, then it's time to go. Don't wait any longer, because if you wait till you're 89, 95, 100% sure, you're not going to go. And that good opportunity could come and go just because you were waiting to get to 85, 95% sure that you're going to do it. Pull up your boots, point them in the right direction, and start marching. So those were my 10 things off the top of my head that I would suggest if you're going to open up a school. Avoid taking out loans. Be prepared to market yourself openly out in the public. Be prepared to work long hours. Have confidence in requiring a fee. Do your viability research. Make sure that you're getting in close to the right place and close to the right region for the people you want to serve. Learn a social media that carries your voice and is the contact point for the people that you want to appeal to. Be ready to address the 80% of your problems by dealing with the 20% of the population. Build your team as you go. Get clear on your lexicon. And embrace the 75% rule that you're not going to be perfect, you're not going to have everything just right, and you're going to go anyway and do your best to make adjustments along the way. Now, the next thing I have on my list here that I jotted a note down, and I posted this probably about a month ago, but anyway, I saw this picture, and I can't remember exactly where it was, but they were advertising self-defense. And I'm laughing because the picture had this guy laying on his face with another guy standing over him with one of the practice pistols pointed at the back of his head. And on my Facebook and Twitter feed post, I believe I made a comment something like, I can't imagine how much of my martial arts self-protection has failed for me to end up in this position. And it reminded me of graduate school, because one of the hardest exams I ever took in my life was in graduate level exercise physiology. And they had one question on the final exam that read something like this. A marathoner eats a Snickers bar before the race. Follow that Snickers bar as it is broken down into calories and ATP along the way, and how much of that energy is going to be utilized by the marathoner as he goes through his race. It was just one question, but it took like 2 hours to fulfill it. So I thought, well, this would be a good martial arts question, right? If you see a guy laying face down and another guy standing over him with a gun to his head, how many things have failed for you to arrive in this really crappy situation, and what are the odds that you're getting out? I could see that being a 5 to 7 point essay easy, or you just don't pass the exam. And if you tell me that you have the secret technique like some low right scorpion kick to the back of the rear end, I think I might just fail you on the spot. Man, what a crappy place to be in. And one other thing I wanted to bring up, because I have been asked this several times, and where people write me, and they'll say something like, hey, Sifu, I really want to do a podcast. And I will honestly tell you, I will usually pause for a moment before I respond, because the first thing I want to say is, really? You want to do a podcast? And I say that because doing a podcast is very challenging. You have a lot to learn on the technological side and keep up with it, because Apple and some of these other places change how they do things from time to time. You have to be prepared to financially invest in it. And to be honest with you, it is extremely difficult to regularly do a podcast. I've mentioned on this program several times before that I had started taking some voice lessons and doing some work. And one of the things I found out was that voice actors, people who do animation, audiobooks, commercials, PowerPoint presentations for companies and things like that, have 2 times that they track. And I mean by times, the amount of time they spend on a project. And the first is the finish time, which is what you hear, the 30-second commercial or the 90-minute audiobook. That is the finish time. And then there's the actual time, which is the amount of time that they actually spend preparing and working on that project. And remember that the voiceover actor is just responsible for taking a script, learning that script, putting a voice to it, making it something that seems natural in the context of which is being served, and then turning that over. And they may have to take 15, 20 takes and research it till they get to understand it. But it's good, solid work. And the usual rule of thumb is that for every hour that you hear on finish time represents on the low end about 7 to 8 hours of actual time. Now, I can tell you that from a podcasting point of view, it's even more. I started the podcast in a bootstrap, and I realized that at some point I'm going to have to bring some team members on to help me with either the website kind of stuff or publishing kind of things so that I can get more projects recorded. But when you bring on a team, then you increase your expenses. So my point to that is that if an audio voice actor is using about 7 to 8 hours to give you a finished product, if you're trying to do podcasting, you can estimate to spend anywhere from probably about 8 to 14, 15 hours to get 1 hour of good podcast quality. And that's everything from gathering the research, studying the research, knowing what you want to talk about, put a voice to it, get some artwork, get it up on a website that you've built, pay for the hosting, get all that stuff FTP'd up. And there's a lot of work to be done in order for you to get one podcast out. And then to do that each week, you got to have some podcast muscle. So I'm not trying to discourage you. What I'm trying to do is to make sure that before you, for example, open up a martial arts school, know what you're going to need before you get into it. And if you want to one day be a podcaster, welcome. We'd love to have you. And having good programs is something that we would all enjoy. But do your due diligence and realize that there's quite a bit of work. The 30 minutes or 20 minutes that I'm in your ear and you're hearing me, there's a lot of work that went on behind the scenes to get it to you in a way that I feel like it carries a quality that I can be proud of. Well, now let's get ready to pull this Kung Fu Podcast Flow Drill to a close by looking at the next 4 forecasted projects. And the first one I have on the list is William Fairbairn's biography. We mentioned him in episodes before, particularly when we're talking about Shanghai, former Marine, police officer in Shanghai, who helped clear out some of the roughest and toughest gangs that have ever existed in China. If I remember correctly, he got his rear end kicked when he was younger, began studying the martial arts, and then he became one well-respected martial artist in both military and law enforcement realms. Another project that's up and coming is the history and culture of the Filipino martial arts. And I just finished over an hour and a half, almost 2 hours of research on MacArthur's spies. General MacArthur had spies littered throughout the Philippines that were instrumental so that he could make a return and take the region back from the Japanese in the 1940s. Here at Kung Fu Podcast, several Japanese styles, Chinese styles, Thailand, Korean, Okinawan have all had some airtime, so I've laid out an outline for the Filipino arts, and in particularly mostly because things like the Kali and the Eskrima have really been rewarding for my practice. And as a martial artist, aren't we always trying to learn and to grow? Number 3 on my list is a response to an email from Anthony probably about 6 months ago or so, I'm thinking off the top of my head, where he was asking me about this conflict between Christians and their perspectives toward martial arts. At that particular time, when he first asked me the question, I gave you all a little backdrop of how, I grew up here in the Bible Belt in North Carolina and some of the things I experienced back in the late 80s and early 90s before there was the whole internet thing, about what, for example, a Southern Baptist may have told you at that time, what they thought about martial arts, because that's where I was coming from. And it was not a pleasant experience. I didn't understand it. I had no way to research it at that time either. There wasn't too many books that explained martial arts back in the time. But I have began developing the outline of this project, and I've got about 3-4 hours into it. And right now, the working title is Missionaries and the Martial Arts. What was this original conflict between the Christians and the Asian culture, and where martial arts fell in that context? And then the 4th project that I've requested permission to share with you, and I believe that's all going to go through just fine, a research thesis by Michael Mainland, and it's titled Martial Mind, Examining the Relationship Among Martial Arts Participation, Identity, and Well-Being. It's an excellent 160-page essay, which I want to summarize and bring to you because I believe there's a lot of value in his research. And that brings us to the completion of this Kung Fu Podcast Flow Drill. If you find value in Kung Fu Podcast and you find value in this program, I can use your support. Whether it's contributing a few dollars to help offset expenses, you can go to kungfupodcast.com/support and help any way you can, which includes leaving reviews that represent what you feel about this program, or tell a friend. It all helps. Until I get this next project ready to roll and publish, keep your practice up, do your best, and I look forward to talking with you again real soon. Take care.